Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
All right. Greetings and welcome to Live Talk. I am your host, Arthur Jeremiah, alongside my two co-hosts, Minister Samuel.
Hey, welcome back again to Live Talk, everyone.
And my brother, Yikat Zekia.
Peace.
All right. And before we go to anything, let us go to our general statement and disclaimer. General statement. Live Talk is proudly powered by TBS Goodwill, Builders of the Highway Foundation, and Men of Purpose. Together, we're bringing about awareness to the everyday challenges facing individuals, communities, and our nation. We tell our stories, listen to yours, and always respect different perspectives. Want to share your voice? Email us at livetalkorl@gmail.com to be a guest, or if you would like to contribute to our mission, purpose, go to livetalkorl.com to give a donation. Disclaimer. Information provided during this event and others to come does not constitute the official opinion of Live Talk or its affiliate entities. It is strongly recommended that viewers seek independent expert advice regarding any topics discussed, as legal requirements differ significantly across jurisdictions and are subject to frequent changes. If you have questions or concerns, you can always email us at livetalkorl@gmail.com, or you can DM us on Facebook and or Instagram at Live Talk Orlando. All right, welcome back. And my brothers, how are my brothers doing today? Starting with you, Minister Samuel. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing wonderful. Top of the morning. Always a beautiful day when we can wake up and we can see the sun and understand that that is a physical sun as well as a spiritual sun, if you can understand the antidote.
Yes, sir, indeed. My brother, Yikat Zekia.
I'm doing terrific, King. Like I say, it's a beautiful day out here. So all is golden in the land.
Absolutely. And for myself, another masterful week. We're in the season of Feast of Weeks. So, we've been enjoying that. It's the harvest time. So we get to enjoy that, benefit from, the crop that we have sown, whether spiritual or physically. We get to benefit from that. So it's a lot of information and knowledge that has been shared. So just enjoying that. So for the family, just to give you a rundown of the show today, we're going to have the minister word of today, and then shortly after that, we done went to a lot of commercial breaks, so we almost used up all our commercials. So we may not need a commercial break.
They got a double bang for their buck today.
Right. But our main topic today, we're going to be talking about, dear graduates, what I wish I knew at 22. And right after that, we'll probably go to a commercial break just to break the sections. But then we're going to talk about Juneteenth, which is coming up this Thursday. So, and as you can see, I got my Juneteenth shirt today.
Represent.
And we'll end with a motivational quote or a reading from the host. So, Minister, with no further ado, what is the word of today?
Okay, the word of today will be education. And by definition, education is the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or university. Education is the act or process of imparting or acquiring general knowledge, developing the powers of reasoning and judgment, and generally preparing oneself or others intellectually for mature life. Education is the act or process of imparting or acquiring particular knowledge or skills for a profession. Education is an enlightening experience. And some synonyms for education are enlightenment, knowledge, learning, instruction, schooling, teaching, training, tuition, tutelage, and tutoring. And a couple of quotes on education. The first one is from writer and educator James Baldwin, which he says, education is indoctrination if you're white, but it is subjugation if you're black. And then Carter G. Woodson said, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. Education.
Education. All right. Like I mentioned before, normally we'll get right into our commercial break, and we're going to do a quick rundown. We're going to do a 30-second rundown so that we can transition, because today we do have a special guest that's in the studio that we want to introduce, that's going to be talking about the topic of sharing his experience on the topic today. And we want to make sure that we bring him in properly. So we're going to go to a quick countdown, and we'll be right back with our special guest. Said before, today our main topic today is Dear Graduates, What I Wish I Knew at 22. And I'm gonna turn it over to the minister to introduce our guest for today.
Okay. All right. Well, today we have a guest joining us live. A little bit of background. Our guest was actually homeschooled, I think from pre-primary all the way up through senior. Then they graduated to a high school, a correspondence high school, where they did an accelerated program to get credits. They then transitioned to college, where they went through a 4-year and got their bachelor's, went out, did some work study nationally, came back, and now they're actually working on their master's, and as well as being an educational coach for students who are looking on how to navigate their way through the educational system and then moving forward in life. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest, who is not only a guest, but he is actually my son. We would like to welcome Shemuel Russ to the program.
All right. Welcome, sir.
Hello, you both. Nice to be here.
All right, let's give you some sound.
Finally got sound now. Hi, you both. Nice to be here. And also, happy Father's Day, particularly to you. Happy Father's Day.
Yes, sir, indeed. And happy Father's Day to all the listeners, the fathers that are out there. So appreciate that. Thank you, sir. All right, so we always like the guests to come on, and when they come on to introduce themselves to the listening audience. So if you will, introduce yourself to the listening audience. We know that you got a nice introduction, but it's not like hearing from you.
No, of course. So, like my father said, my name is Shemuel, but everyone can, I go by Shimmy. So I am this man's son. I am middle-ish child of 7.
Yes.
So I did actually, I went to an accelerated school for about 2 years because I was homeschooled till the age of 16. I then graduated from there and went to 2 years at Seminole State College to get my AA degree. I then actually took a gap year doing some student teaching in Orlando, got back.
And we're going to get, because I just wanted you to introduce yourself, because we're going to get to a lot of these questions today, because we know you got a background that goes way back, and we want the audience to be able to receive that, because there's somebody that's listening in, whether it's a mother, whether it's, a graduate. We even speaking to last year graduates, we talked about this even last year. So we want to be able to get that information out, because oftentimes, we go through high school, we finish, high school, we graduate from high school, and then there's myths, and then there's reality to life. So we want to deal with, like, what's the myth versus the reality of what actually happens when one exits, high school, and then going on that journey into life. What does that look like? So with that being said, I can ask the first question.
Yes, sir.
So the first question for you is this: what was your first job after graduation? How did it compare to what you expected? Now, you can go back a little bit just to kind of share this coming out of high school if you want to, but those are the questions that I want you to kind of focus on.
Yeah, so it depends. So you're asking first job out of college or first job high school? Which are you asking for?
So what it looks like coming out of high school, what's the reality of that?
Yeah.
Transitioning to college. So what the measures that you had to take in regards to coming out of high school. Did you get a job? Was your mindset at the level like, I'm going to that next level of education? Or was you just thinking about, I'm just going to get a job? Did you, we're going to talk about a little bit about relationships moving further down, but just focus on that part.
Yeah. So first job out of college, out of high school, a little unique. I got the job right before I graduated. So it was technically a job right before high school. It was, I was working at Ross doing retail at night. So that was my first high school job. At the time, there was no sense of career progression or anything with it. It was at that time, I'm 17 years old. I'm still living with my parents, but I'm kind of, wanting to do my own things. I'd only just got the phone last year at 16. So my mother was still paying my bill, but I'm like, I still want to go out sometimes. I just got my license. My parents let me drive. So I need a little money. So I honestly had just had the job just to kind of have a little bit of spending money while I was kind of transitioning out of high school to get into college. I would say particularly the main myth I would say is I think I definitely had an expectation after high school I would maybe be doing more at first. Then as I'm kind of getting towards the end of high school, I definitely realized the reality of what the job market was and realized like, okay, after high school, I'm just going to be doing something very basic. So I guess I definitely had a little bit of an expectation of as soon as out of high school, I would already kind of be preparing for whatever I'd be doing later in life. And it was just not the case. It was just a kind of basic transitionary period, make a little money, make some spending money while I'm transitioning to college. So,
because I know like when you graduate and get that diploma, that's an exciting moment. That's like an achievement. And most youth, when they get to that point and, leave high school and they get that diploma, because parents on them the whole time, you need to finish school, etc. They feel like once they did that, that's it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't accomplish this. And then in most cases with parents, like, okay, either you're going to continue your education or, you're going to get a job. So you trying to define like what you're going to do and what you're going to be. And you saying 17 years of age, it's like, wow, like at 17, you're not thinking about what you're finna do for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. I don't believe.
It's actually funny you say that regarding like the planning and approach, because particularly because I was homeschooled from 16, I kind of definitely felt very behind as I was, starting high school, finishing high school, then about to start college. Because I graduated, February of 2016 from high school. Okay. And then I started college August of 2016. So I didn't really have, the only wait was in between the terms starting. And I had a pretty thought out plan when I was starting. Like I'm like, okay, now I'm officially in the real world outside of homeschool. So I actually created myself when I started high school, a 10-year plan back then that I still have now that I kind of update and things. So I was like really focused on if I'm starting college, like I'm going to do it right. I'm not going to kind of waffle or do any of the mistakes that as I'm getting in the real world, I'm getting a little more into the world. I'm reading things and I'm like, I see a lot of mistakes that people make. So I was like really really intensely not trying to make those same mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had a good guide too.
Well, and and he had some opportunities. I guess, and I don't want to get too veered off with the job. I want to follow up with yours and his, because we do have some parents that have them in homeschool, and some of them, if you could touch on a bit of that, because homeschool can be a really great thing, but there's also, I'm going to say, some challenges or either some directions that you need to understand if you're going from homeschool to college. What do you need? Or some people, like, homeschool is great, but depending on how you do your homeschool, what happens after homeschool? If, for example, if you're going into a family-based business or you have a business to start, how many people at 16, 17 can start a business? Can you talk a little bit about that transition from homeschool, high school to college? What's necessary?
So it's funny you say that, because actually because as you said, I'm in my master's now, and I just started it in spring. And for one of those classes, I actually had to do a project where it was a research project on like educational attainment, difference in focus of like traditional students versus like students in like homeschool, private school and stuff. So I've thought about this topic quite a lot. Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely an interesting topic. So for mine particularly, our homeschool was relatively, unique in that a lot of it was we went through different periods. Sometimes it was very self-paced. Mother kind of gives us books. Here's like a general outline of what y'all are doing. Here's what you're doing. Then other times we kind of were in like a private school where it was a little more structured. Then other times we were in FLVS, Florida Virtual. So went through a lot of different versions. I would say the main thing that I took away from it is definitely the level of independence. I would say I definitely had to get used to like, okay, it's up to me to kind of like, okay, here's the guide. Like, we need you to read this English textbook. But it was kind of on us to then like figure it out. So it definitely was a lot less structured. And so I would say that actually prepared me when it comes to like having to research about college on my own, because like having to take that initiative. I would say definitely in terms of probably the biggest thing to pay attention to is not being maybe used to certain social cues or certain situations. I would say, in school, there's cliques that you learn about. There's all these different things that you're just so used to. And that definitely was like a little bit of a culture shock for me because when we were 16, I started doing martial arts. And so I'm like really like out and about now. And there were definitely lots of like terms and phrases and slang that I was like, what are you all saying? I have no idea what you all are talking about. So I definitely feel like in terms of from an academic standpoint, lots of level of independence and focus, but there was definitely kind of a shock when it comes to certain like cultural understandings and lingo that I was very, very unfamiliar with.
Well, you can see, we're going to bring you in the screen here.
Well,
you hear our conversation, right?
Yes, sir. I heard everything that's been said. So that's great. He's giving you a knowledge of what he learned, and then the reality of when he got outside the house and went to interacting with the social society in the schools. As he said, one of the things most definitely was going to be the cultural shock because the difference in the language from what he had been taught. So that's a great thing. But my question for that is right there, how long did it take your peers to adjust to you?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So, I'm not actually sure if it took them that long to adjust to me. I think it really was me adjusting to them, if that makes sense. I feel like the way I think about it is, when you think about those groups of friends on like high school TV shows, there's like the different cliques. There's the popular person, there's the nerd and stuff. I feel like lots of people deal with a kind of awkward person, someone who maybe doesn't fit the norm. So I think that was it was kind of easy for them to kind of adjust to me. I think it was me being kind of more in my social bubble, in my shell, that it took a while. And I'll be honest, even to this day, there are still some things that I'm like, I got it, but I definitely sometimes I'm like, I don't think other people have to think about that in the same way that I do. So I would say even to this day, there took some adjusting, but I would say it probably took from my first time, like going out at 16, probably about 3 years when I was like really like into college, where I was like, okay, I'm still maybe a little weird, but like I got this. Like I see what's going on. So probably a good 3 years or so.
Okay. You got it. Okay. What is that question? Can we read it?
Okay, let me see here. It is, and this comes from, look like this, Miss Finance Pro. So financially, how were you able to be offered your education?
Oh, okay. So that can get into a whole topic. So, so my first 2 years, actually, when I was at Seminole State, that was all paid for either through federal Pell Grants or through individual scholarships that I applied to. So one thing that a lot of people might not be aware of is that if your family makes, I'd have to see what the numbers are particularly, but a number that a pretty sizable majority of families end up making income-wise, you can usually get the full Pell Grant, which is about $7,000 per year, free, no payback. At the time I was going, it was like $6,200. So for my first 2 years, because my family at the time didn't make over the income threshold, I was getting the full amount. And I was going to a state school that only cost about $3,500 a year. I was getting 63, and I was very aware of that delta. So I was, for the first 2 years, I was going completely for free through Pell Grants. And then I also applied for like some first generation scholarships. So I always joke that I actually got paid to go to school for at least my first 2 years.
And just to follow up, you did that at Seminole State, which is a state college, but it wasn't a university, but the courses were less expensive.
Yeah, exact same.
Why did you pick Seminole versus going straight to UCF?
So while I was doing my research for college, one thing that quickly became apparent to me was like, okay, the difference between there's universities, traditional four-year institutions, and state colleges. And I came across something specific that we have in Florida called Direct Connect to UCF. And it basically is like, hey, if you successfully get an AA degree from these 6 partner institutions, making sure you align with other university policies and procedures, you're guaranteed admission. And I saw that and I was like, okay, wait, so I can eventually go and get my bachelor's at UCF, but I can get it, what the price difference was like 99 per credit hour at Seminole State versus like almost 200 at UCF. So it was like double the price. And I was just like, well, if it's the same classes, I'm gonna just go there. So understanding how that works, I decided, I was like, it just makes sense to go to a state college before going to a university.
Unless somebody just prepared to cut a check, right?
My family was not. I was like, were you prepared to cut a check?
We're prepared to cut a check, but it would depending on the amount of the check.
Right. No, that's beautiful. You know, I like to hear that because we're trying to, you know, it's a young person, it's a parent. You know, we had someone that chimed in. They want to know what that's like because their child just graduated from high school. So they want to know what that next step is. And they don't want to be told a myth about what it is. And then they're, you know, chasing their tail. We have to give, you know, straight answers about what one can do. And I like that because you shared some great information when it comes to that. When I look back, and I ain't going to make this about myself, you know, when I came out of high school, you know, of course, when I was 22, I was in another situation, you know, we ain't gonna get into that because that's a whole nother story, another conversation. But the next question, because we're still dealing with myths and reality. Do we have another question that's out there? Another comment? Okay. So, what was the biggest myth you believed about adulthood or career?
You know, the biggest myth that I'm seeing this in my life now is that as a kid, when you see adults and they have their car or they have their apartment, they have their job, their family, whatever it is, there's this idea as a kid that like they have everything together, like they got it made. And then you get older and you get some of those things yourself, and then still realizing that you're either not fulfilled or missing things, and you realize that like most people still don't have it together, and like that's fine, like everyone's still working on themselves. But I think that's the biggest myth, is that like there's definitely an idea sometimes like, okay, you know, 17, 18, go to college, 22, graduate, this great job, feel successful, find your partner, get married, have kids by 30, boom, and it all works out. And like sometimes for some people that does work out, and that's great. Right. But I think the myth is that like that is A, going to happen to everybody, right. B, should happen to everybody. So I would say that just the distinction between like what it is people actually have going on and how quote unquote successful they are, how much they have it together, and how quick or how long it actually takes to achieve those things. No,
I agree, because we talk about you get a good education, you know, you get a good career, you pretty much you done made it, or get a good education and a degree, you done made it. But we know that's not true, because now you got to try to find a job. And, you know, we know that can be a challenge. And then, you know, finding a mate and a good mate can be a challenge, because that can, you know, derail you. So I get it. You want to follow up on that?
Well, it's just a lot of, it's a lot of different things coming through mine. When you're talking about success, and I guess you touched it. If you, like, what does success mean to you? If you could think back to high school, college, what would that have meant to you? Now that you're looking back versus when you were there.
Yeah, I mean, so
for someone going into it.
I mean, because while I was there, had a pretty simple mission. While I was in college and high school, it was to only get an A in everything and like just pass. So that was pretty much my goal while I was there, and I mostly achieved that. Got a few B pluses and A minuses here and there. So that was like my general approach there. Looking back now, and I would say I did learn it. I think I just learned to be like fulfilled in like what you're doing. Like even with, I was obviously focused on trying to get good grades and stuff. And obviously looking back now, I realized that that focus was not that important necessarily. The individual grades don't matter. But I was really focused, and it gave me fulfillment. Like it genuinely gave me joy, like trying to get those good grades and like staying up late to get those assignments to make sure I could get every assignment in to make sure I got 100 on the thing instead of a 95. So I would say looking back, I was really focused on like individual metrics, like doing well in school, which is obviously important. But I would say I really realized how important it is, like to just like find like fulfillment and like find actual value in what you're doing is what I would say.
Let's bring Yikiziki in.
Yes, that makes sense. Having a goal and what you want out of life. So now, once you got out of college, how long did it take for you to be able to achieve the financial goals that you had already set? And did your expectations get met, or did you get let down about, let's say, the job market and your ability to reach your goals?
You know, so it's funny because I graduated in 2022, summer of 2022. Right before I graduated, I would say I have not necessarily met, if I had that mindset previously, I would say I haven't necessarily met the goals that I wanted to reach or anything like that, and that my expectations of the job market were definitely skewed. Where I'm at now, I would actually say it's very aligned with what I expected and what I planned for when I started. And I would say I have achieved the general financial goals that I've tried to work for. And it took me, since graduating in 2022, it took me about 2 years. So I graduated in 2022, and it took me about 2 years, like in summer of 2024 into 2024, I would say that I achieved those.
All right. Well, that's a good thing. You know, anytime we achieve something, it then allows for us to set more goals for ourselves, because we know we can accomplish those goals. And I like that, because you focus that's going back 17 years of age, you know, you don't find, you know.
I literally can look at my phone, and there's still a note that was the initial history created is from 2016 that I still make edits to and things like that. And like make sure we go, okay, this stayed the same, but this adjusted a little bit.
You hear that, son?
I'm gonna say I heard something there that's a serious nugget about having some goals and being focused. That even young people, you need to set some goals. You wrote your goals down, and to be focused on them And, one of my favorite topics is I love talking about money. And we talked about 2-year degree, and I don't want to miss over because then I'm going to say, like, a lot of people think, you get that 4-year degree. And once you get that, you're set. When you got the 4-year degree, got a job, but now moving, did you find out you needed more? And even to that before it, maybe some, like, what did it take to get the 4 years? What are some of the things you might tell people to be careful of in getting that? What that cost's gonna look like versus what kind of return you're gonna get.
So I'll start off with a high level view. I think first and foremost, when it comes to getting a degree, I think in general, and understandably, there's a large misconception between what the degree will do for you and what it's for, and what people expect of it. And obviously, this is a whole political conversation about the change in education and prices from the 1980s and 90s to now. But generally speaking, it's really important for people to understand, it's like, okay, if I'm getting a bachelor's degree, generally speaking, there's like 3 types of bachelor's degrees. There's like a general bachelor's, like a political science, psychology, or something like that, that are generally teaching you the tricks of the trade or whatever focus you're doing, will prepare you for most kind of entry-level office or administrative jobs, and also prepare you to go to school to get your master's degree. And then you have like associative science. And so I would say main thing is that a lot of people, I think, unfortunately, sometimes think that, okay, I go to school, I get a bachelor's degree, I'll be able to land my dream job. It's like, no, that's not what the bachelor's degree does for you. It gets you in the door, gets you to get a job that has a decent benefits, decent salary and stuff, and then you can either decide to work up in that job or go back to school or whatever. But I would say there's just a big like misunderstanding about what you need from that, what degree will do for you. In terms of getting it, I mean, so I always personally, school was very easy for me, so I didn't personally have to try that much. I'm gonna be so honest, and sometimes that makes me feel a little bad because I see people struggling, and I'm just like, oh, well, that was easy. I would say outside of it being easy, planning and honestly having deadlines. Most things in school are not that difficult, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Getting a bachelor's, at least, it is not that difficult. I truly believe most people are competent enough to, again, unless, there's some specifics like an engineering degree or various specifics, but most degrees, most people are competent enough. It's, are you actually going to take the time to actually study for 2 or 3 hours to make sure you get the answers right and things like that? So basic planning is what I would say is extremely important. In terms of after I graduated, I would say I landed a job again. So I planned it pretty far ahead. So I like the job I'm in now, I was like 95% sure I was going to have that job 3 years before I graduated, because I had done a student position in it before. I had gotten to know the previous manager of the position. And so I knew pretty early on, I'm like, okay, this is the type of job I'm going to get. This is the pay for it and everything. But I had done my homework. And so obviously a lot of, for me, the job I got and what I worked towards was pretty expected, because I, at that point in 2022, when I'm landing the job, I'm like, okay, I understand the myths that exist. I understand the actual expectation of the job market. I know I'm not going to be able to jump out of career making 80, 90,000 a year as a bachelor's in Orlando. That's not going to happen. Right. So it was pretty on par with what I expected after I had understood a little more about okay, here's the way the economy in the world actually seems to work.
Okay. Now I often say I'm first generation, everything coming out of my mother's house. And I learned early on in my life that I determine what my success looks like. So with that being said, I'm going to ask you this here. How did you learn what success really means for you?
How or why? That's I mean, I would say I learned what success means for me by when you kind of get to pretty low points in life. It's kind of easy to then compare, okay, this is what I feel like when I'm failing. And then when you do something that makes you feel successful. So having went through some times in life where failing and feeling very emotionally down. But I would say for me, success, it's hard because success it's not an easy word to describe, right? because sometimes when you think about success, sometimes you want to think about, okay, financial success.
Right.
Like, am I making a certain amount of money, right? Then you want to think about, like, emotionally successful. Am I mentally doing well? Socially successful. Do I have good relationships with my family, my friends, and things? So I guess one thing is to say, realize that success is not one simple defined thing. Just because you see someone has a lot of money. Again, maybe in the field of finances and income, they are successful. So I think I've realized that success comes in different forms. And then when you realize what those forms are, which as an adult, this is hard, but try to find time to balance your focus on those different things. So like I said, not because I think one thing that I remember being young, that was because it's very easy with like social, me growing up in the social media age, seeing people that had things that I didn't have, it definitely makes you feel bad. Yeah. Like, why do they have this new game system? Why do they have all these things? And that as a kid was like, I definitely, this is like 15, 16 before kind of going to high school. I felt like, if I'm in my 20s and I don't have those things, I'm not successful. And like, so that was definitely a thought that I had kind of going into the transition. But then now looking back and realizing, I'm like, okay, no, financial success. I'm like, are my bills paid? Do I have enough money to invest? Do I also have enough money to spend on myself for fun? Yeah, okay, I'm financially successful. My family relationship, I have a good relationship with my parents and my family. Okay, do I talk to them relatively on occasion? Yeah. Do we spend time together as family? Yeah. Cool. So trying to think about what are the different ways that success exists, and then what are realistic ways that you can achieve those, and kind of not, becoming successful to this kind of grand ideas about what success is and how much success everyone has to have.
So we got different measuring sticks at different times in our life, like how we determine what that is. Because I thought I was saying, when you determine what success is for you, that's what's going to fulfill you. Like you mentioned, like it ain't just about finances. It's a whole 360 of things. We have to take into consideration, like you said, relationships, finances, family time, etc. So I love that. I hope someone listening to that to kind of be able to receive that. Minister?
Well, when you talk about finances, faith, relationships, I'm gonna move
okay. Yes, sir.
to another question. Like, what is the one thing you wish someone would have told you about money after college or even before?
One thing? Is it just one?
One or two? or the most important things you wish someone had told you?
Oh man, I could talk about this one forever. Man, I'm gonna touch on like three, because one is just too much. I mean, so
it's not up as
coming a little closer.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I would say, just kind of going back to the job thing, is that like, you're not going to be making insane amounts of money likely coming out of college. If you're lucky, maybe again, if you're at certain degrees, you get lucky, like that's really fortunate. But statistically speaking, you're not going to be making, 60, 70, 80K as a
six figures
as a 22-year-old graduate with a psychology degree. Like, it's just not going to happen. So that was like, definitely like, that was like a myth. Like this idea that you graduate and you just boom, making six figures at 22, like that's very rare. So that's like one, like a myth that was just like, okay, quickly realize that is, and again, it's so like when you're 22 and you're only making 40, 50K, that's actually good. If you're making that as salary with benefits, that's actually good at 22. So having to reshift like what it actually means and how much you can expect to be making. The other one I would say is like, man, it is so important to live within your means.
Yes, sir.
I think this one is really personal for me because I've recently went on like a kind of debt journey after like graduating in 2022, where like I was like, okay, after I land my first job, I know I'm not going to be wanting to live with my parents anymore, so I know I need to have like my finances in order. And I quickly realized like, okay, well, with this credit card, a couple $1,000s, I have a credit card debt here, and if I have a car payment here, and this debt, I was like, this is not going to fly. And the only way I would survive is if I took out more credit cards. And I realized that was quickly not what I wanted to do. So from like 2022 to 2024, I like, all my consumer debt, like got rid of it and everything. I managed to, during my gap years of school, some of the jobs I did, I very intentionally, they got me scholarships afterwards. So I used some of that to pay off some of the debt I incurred my last year at university. So paid off all that debt. And then now I'm like, just very intentional. I'm like, okay, what are my bills look like? I'm like very dialed in with my numbers. I don't think everyone has to be quite as much as me, but like, okay, like how much is that I make? What are my expenses look like? What the proportion of my expenses to my income is, how much percent would leave me, how much percent left for fun and everything. I have all that in order. And it's like, okay, no debt. I have enough money to invest. I have enough money to spend money on fun. So important versus unfortunately. And I see it with a lot of my personal family members, friends, like it is, sometimes you live life so beyond your means during a certain point that then it just becomes so hard and you're having to live with that. And like, that is like something that I see a lot of young people dealing with, that I'm like, that is, so like use your time now to get rid of that. Because then the third thing that's really important that I wish you knew about is like how important it is to start investing early. Like that was, I was fortunate enough that like through like conversations with my father about in general saving, I always had a pretty good knack on like, okay, generally saving 10%, like that's important. So that was always a good baseline, to the point that when I finally like got my first job, started actually making money, it was like, oh, okay, so like 10% should be getting saved away. And then after I learned about investing, like that is going to be really important, because I think, I know for a fact, most people either have no idea what investing is and just don't do it. If they do it, it's just the minimum whatever suits their job, which is nice, but it's likely not enough to actually get you through with what you're going to need in the future. So the importance of making sure you're investing really, really early, that is definitely something that I wish. Oh, to be fair, I knew it like right as I was graduating. Mm-hmm. I definitely wish I knew it like while I was in high school type like that. I wish I knew that for a long time.
I think the biggest thing is when you know it, it's like the old G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe. G.I. Like, my goodness. G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. So when you know something, it's just about applying it. A lot of times we'll have information and we'll know certain things, but we don't apply it. I think that's the biggest thing, like coming out and I wish somebody would have told me, about money, to pile enough up, to have you some emergency funds available over here, so that if something was to happen, you got money that you can take from and don't hurt yourself at the same time. So I think that's one of the things. If it was me, that's one of the things I wish somebody would have told me. It's later, like you said, later on in your life, you start to learn these things, but then it's about applying those things, because the more knowledge hopefully you're at that point where you're trying to apply that information and that knowledge. I bring Yiki into the screen.
Yes, that's definitely a must, because everybody has money, in some form. So if you don't know how to budget that money, then make your life very, very hard in these days. So that's good. He was able to find that out, even though he caught himself in a little debt, he was able to get out of it. And now, do you plan going forward now with the wisdom that you have prior to what you had between the ages of 16 and 22? What would be the advice you would give a 16 or 17-year-old now coming out of high school about budgeting?
Mm-hmm. Oh man, there's so many things, so many little pieces of advice. I mean, the main piece of advice would be learn about it. Because like you had said, that one of the biggest issues that people, they really honestly just don't know. Mm-hmm. And because sometimes I once I kind of got through my situation of debt and stuff, I realized when I would have friends mention to me, I started like, hey, like, how is this going for you? And I get really weird. I ask people like invasive questions about their money, because I'm strange, like, I just realized it through talking to him that like he just didn't know. He was doing things, and I'm like, you're losing more money because the way you're doing that. He's like, wait, what do you mean? Like, he really just didn't know, and I ended up like helping him like pay off some of his debts and stuff he got, and like now he like has a savings and everything. So the main advice would be like, take time to learn about money, learn about compound interest, learn about budgeting, learn about saving, learn about debt, learn about interest rates. Like that would be the real main piece of advice, of like very holistically. But then a very specific piece of advice would be like, live on less than you make. If you can do that, even if you can, I don't know if I can curse on this. I'm like, I don't know if I can curse on.
We have to.
I was like, oh man, I lost my train of thought. I'm like, that was
live on what you make.
I was like, no, like you live on less than you make, because if you can do that, if you fuck up on everything else, you'll still have a baseline because okay, I make enough to live. If you can do that, you'll mess up on some things. You'll probably take longer to get by on certain things, but at the very least, you can survive. Too many people nowadays live on more than they make, and they get so used to it through either revolving credit card usage, through their having a car loan, and them not, like, for example, something that which again, me being weird, when I had a car payment, I had a car payment for 7 months. So I got the car payment, and then I went crazy and paid it off. And outside of the actual, I was paying like $279 a month or whatever it was. I'm thinking about that in the context of like, okay, how much interest a month am I actually losing? Oh, wow, that's a lot of money. What if I was investing that same amount of money? How much would that charge? That'd be $150,000. Like, I'm thinking about those things. And because it's like those one thing that like really small things that people do, it's so easy to not think about them. Where it comes like, people, bless their hearts. And I'm so joking when I say this, but the people who spend on their Starbucks or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, which we all have it. Our vices, our little things that we spend on. Right. Totally fine in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're doing those things while at the same time struggling to make your bills, having debt, and when you actually realize that, you're actually spending about $100 a month on all those random things. And if you think about it, like that $100 a month over the course of 5 years, compound invest, be like $8,000. Can you imagine what you would do if you had $8,000? It's like, how much better would your life be if you had $8,000 in cold hard cash versus if you had to live without those Starbucks mac and cheese? Like things
movie
like
dinner,
that,
Starbucks.
Things like that, people really don't think about. And it's like, it's not to say that you have to be in the weeds about everything and that you can't spend money on things. No, but like as a baseline, know how much you're spending, know how much you're investing, and make sure you actually can afford the things that you're doing.
And I want to jump in because you said it, and I want to make it real clear something. Like you said, living above your means. You can be making something, but if people say, well, if I earned that amount of money, well, if I spent it all, it was mine. But if you spend it all, that means you're spending more than you're living above your means. Right. Because something that we taught, of course, and for those, pay Yahweh and yourself and don't touch it. That's a beginning. But you said something real clear about educating yourself on money and finances, because that's just the beginning. You got to be able to take that and then move it forward. And if you start doing it young, which, see, some of us are older, but here's a young person saying, start saving, start investing, because it's more than just saving. It's investing.
And one of the things he said that I want everybody to really take this in, understand interest, compound interest. So many, and you probably can speak on this here, so many college students get into debt, credit card debt, and they don't understand their interest rates and how that is affecting them financally. You want to speak on that a little bit?
No.
Don't they offer them to you, college students?
They throwing it at them. It's man, it is honestly so, especially when you learn about debt and interest rates, you realize just how bad it is. That like, I remember before, like when I got my first credit card, and I always, thankfully to him, knew not to like just run up my debt and things like that. So I was never having that issue. But I remember first seeing the interest rate on the card. It was a student card. So they were giving like a discount. It was like 17%. And at the time, I'm like, okay, that seems high, but that seems, like doable. As you then understand the way interest works, you realize that even the good rates are so predatory that it's like that. Like, it's like you have like a total mind shift where it's like, okay, 17 is good. No, 17 is terrible. 17% interest on anything is terrible. And the thing is, it really makes it come together and you realize, okay, let's think, why is it that number is terrible, right? Because that's the part where they don't know that high interest rate is bad. And then it's like, okay, what is it that makes that bad? So, okay, well, when you think about investing, where you're putting your money away and you want it to grow for you, generally speaking, you can expect, depending on what type of investments you do, anywhere from like 4 to upwards of 12% per year. That's depending on if it's like a low-end bond or like an investment in the stock market or something. 4 to 12%. That's like great. 12 every year is amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. To realize that you're credit card is charging you 17 or 25 or 30, or it's like, wait, 12% can make you a multimillionaire. So what is 25% keeping you poor forever? Like that, when you think about it in those reverse ways, it's like, cause like that is an insane, because those numbers are not meant to be paid off. Like how many people, I still remember when I first looked at this for the first time, why after I got into credit card debt, I was so mad at myself. I had like a $900 charge on my credit card. And it was my first time getting one. And I looked at the statement and it had said that if I just made my minimum payments for $900, it said it was going to take like 12 years to pay off. And I was like,
so how much I'm paying y'all?
And it was like, $900 is how much I charged. But it said that my eventual interest charge said it was going to be like $1,200 extra dollars. And I'm like, I spent $900. I'm paying y'all back $900 plus $1,200. Insane. And the same thing.
Just pay the minimum. It's easy.
And it's like the same thing applies. And it's like when you get like a car, when it's like, okay, most people, it's like they think, it's like, first, let me push the term off 84 months because that makes it more affordable. It's like, yeah, that makes it more affordable on the front end, or on the back end, that's multiple years of interest that's going to compound. And so it's like you're buying a $20,000 car, but you end up paying $42,000 for the car. And then it's like when you think about it in that ways, it's like, obviously you only paid $24,000 up front. Knowing this now, would you actually pay $42,000 for this car? No, you wouldn't. So you shouldn't make this choice. Right. And when you think about things in that way, whether it's credit cards, car loans, student loans, you realize, like, again, to going back to your question, what you wish you knew, because you realize so many things that you get in that just seem so casual. They're so normalized, and it like you don't even think about it. And then when you finally step back, you're just like, this is not. It's actually not okay that we have $1 trillion in student loan debt. It's actually not. Kind of crazy. It's not okay that we had $2 trillion in credit card debt. It's kind of crazy. $1 trillion in car. That's it. It's like there's a lot of things existing that no one actually had. But there's a lot of cars and things like no one actually paid for them yet. You're just pushing it back and pushing it back. Right. No one's actually paid for a lot of the things that we have. You're technically you're renting that thing, really, because you haven't paid for it. It's crazy.
And I want to stop you because we're talking education, and you mentioned that debt. Can you talk a little bit about student loan debt, graduating, being able to pay for that, specifically, or hopefully not graduating with a whole lot of debt? Because I know you didn't. And I don't know if you want to share that and ways to not do that. And if you do have to take on it, how do you manage it?
There's a couple things for that. First and foremost, to preface, our whole system with student debt, the way it works, it's gross, it's predatory. It doesn't work right. Like it just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. All that being said, though, if you are smart and you approach it strategically, there is a way out of it. Unfortunately, due to lack of education, most people approach it very, very not good. So first and foremost, when it comes to debt, in terms of like high level thoughts, something a baseline, you should not take out more debt than what you can reasonably expect to make in a first year salary. That is something that unfortunately people go way out about. I mean, you have people in arts majors taking $150,000, $200,000 of debt, and they're taking $30,000 after college, like well out of bounds. At the most, you should not. I would say you shouldn't be making no more debt than what you can reasonably expect to make in a year. Because if you make that in a year and you then break that down out, it's like, okay, I can reasonably pay this off in like 5 or 7 years. Reasonably, it's like, okay, that means this job, which gives me a decent salary, gives me career progression, benefits. Like, okay, that's doable. So at a high line, like if you're going to take out debt, it's like, okay, no more than the first year salary. When it comes to before you take out debt, particularly in Florida, so because we're very unique with this, but there are a lot of college places that do the same thing. Stop being bougie about the colleges you go to. Like, you got to stop being bougie. Most colleges, unless you're like the 8 or 9 like Ivy Leagues, like, and then maybe like the 20 or so like close to Ivy Leagues, you're learning the same thing. It's the same thing. So like, why are you being bougie about like, oh, I need to go to a state university in California rather than and let me preface, sometimes there can be legitimate reasons for why you might be wanting to. Right. There can be personal issues and things. So let me segregate those people who have legitimate reasons for why they're going to college, want to leave their state. Those people are not it. I'm talking about the people who plan on coming back to their state after they graduate, working in their state. They have no issues with their state. why are you going out of state just to get a psychology degree? It's not a specialized degree. It's not something that can be only offered at this university. You went from Florida to Washington to get a psychology degree, where in Florida, you would have been able to get in-state tuition, costing maybe like at UCF, for example, like 65, at UF, like 8, whatever. It's going to be some decent range. Out of state, $22,000 a year. Why?
But exact same
for the
thing.
exact same. So that's, as a baseline, so many people, and again, it has to do with, the way we advertise college on TV and the dream of leaving house. So there's all this marketing that goes into it, obviously. But like, people want to leave so bad.
Can I say, hold that thought, but you could get approved for they will let you get approved for that loan, even though it's more.
There's almost no restrictions on getting loans aside from like the total loan amount that you're able to get. Other than that, if you say you want to go, it's like they will give it to you, because then first they'll give you the subsidized first, and then once you're on your subsidized, they give you your unsubsidized, and they will let you go. That is never going to be an issue.
Right.
There's very few schools that cost so much that your aid plus regular grants and stuff. Again, unless you're in like the Ivy Leagues and you get no aid, where you would get like all that would go and you still have to have money that you have to pay left. But no, like honestly, yeah, but that is just to say, like, no, people they approach it wrong. Where like, it's like, if you go to college, you get to have a great experience and learn and meet new people. That's great, and that's a great part about college. But you need to understand, which goes back to my issue on, what are you going to college for?
Right.
If you're going to college to get yourself a credential that exists in our society that makes it more likely that you get certain types of jobs, if that's why you're going in to go to a school that has parties and go to a school that's out of state, right, that doesn't make any sense. And that's now, again, if your goal to go to college is to experience life, we need to have a different conversation. But if that's your goal, then fine, go travel, go to wherever you want to go. But most people, when you actually talk to them, that is why they're going to college. They want to get an education, to get a job, to move up in life. Okay, stay in your state. Go to a state school first. It's way cheaper. Go to a local university. Again, unless you're going for a degree that's very specialized, that's only offered at certain places, okay, that's a different conversation. But if you're going to get an English, the most popular is the English, the political science, all the regular degrees, why are you jumping into a university first? And why are you jumping to out-of-state institutions to get something that you could literally get 10 miles from your hometown? Like, why?
I think that goes back to, we talked about the myth versus reality. And oftentimes, that myth is, if we go out of state, we're going to get a better education. Something going to be better out of state, and we're going to come back and bring it back to our state. But let's bring Ziki in.
Correct. So we're going to an in-state school to acquire. Now, looking back, what is the two main things of advice that you would give to somebody while they're in college, preparing themselves socially and emotionally for the world once they graduate?
That's a great question.
And this is our last question before we go to our break.
Mm-hmm. No. So, I mean, tips to prepare. I mean, so first tip would be, which then this kind of goes to a larger conversation on what college does for you. A lot of people, think, oh, just go to college, get the paper, it's going to get you a job. Maybe that worked in the 1980s and 90s. It's just not how it works now. It gets you the credential to get you a baseline to get in, but that is about it. It doesn't do anything more. So you can't just go to college, get the degree, and then be mad that you have no job after, when all you did is go to school, come back home, play video games, do whatever. If that you just went to school, do your work and go, and then get the degree. That's all it's going to give you is that baseline. So my first tip would be like reminding people that when you go to college, the best thing that college does for you is honestly not the education you learn, to be completely honest. That's great. It's fun. I love what I learned. But it's the opportunities that it presents to you while you're there. You're then having teachers and your professors who have been in the field. So that's connection. You have your career services or advising center, which have literal paid deals with organizations in your community, literally looking for graduates of your school. You have resource centers. So like, one thing that a lot of people sometimes miss is that, like, going to college, while the main thing is obviously, and maybe this is an issue with the way college is marketed, but like taking the classes and getting the degree is like such a small portion of what actually you're gaining there. It's the experiences, it's the people you get to be around, it's the opportunities that are presented. So main tip for people in college is like, utilize those opportunities. I can say honestly, particularly, literally the job that I have now, what is now going to be my career for at least the next 10 years, literally I got this because I did a student advisor position while I was in school, made a connection with the previous boss who then recommended me I apply here. And now that's how I have my job. So like, you really have to take advantage of like resources, opportunities. Just going to school and getting good grades even is not enough. So that would be the first tip. The second one would be have a plan. Too often, and I remember talking to some of my like peers like before graduating, people really don't know, and it's unfortunate, they really don't know what they plan on doing after graduating. They're literally getting the degree and there's an idea, I guess, that like a job will come if I have the paper, and when I do apply, that will get me and it's a very narrow-minded approach. Right. So outside of taking advantage of those resources, like plan it out. Like I said with me, when I went to school, I knew I was like, okay, I'm going to take a gap year. That I planned that out because I was like, I know I want to gain real world experience before I actually get my bachelor's degree. So I planned that out before I even started school. Then after going into school and realizing what resources they had, I was like, oh, this is the gap year I'm going to do. To the point that I was like, even before getting my bachelor's, I'm like, I'm going to take an additional gap year. So I planned it all out. So I knew I was going to have 2 gap years in between graduating, which in between that, I know I should be able to talk with my previous boss who can get, it's like, it was all planned out. Like, have a plan. And if you don't know what your plan would be, which then goes back to the first one, there are resources on campus that can literally, you can talk. There are people who are paid administrators who their entire job is to have students come in and be like, what is your interest? What are your goals? Let's work out. Let's create a plan. What would be a next step after graduating? So like one, utilize resources that are offered to you. You get all that tuition and that extremely expensive cost. That's what all that's paying for. So like when all you're doing is going to school, you're really not utilizing the benefits that you're paying for. So utilize the resources and have an actual plan. 5 years? What am I doing? Again, is it going to go exactly according to plan? Of course not. So have some contingencies like, hey, after I graduate, I plan on doing this. This is my most likely position, but maybe I'll have a fallback career. 10 years out, like have a plan so that once, life starts hitting, graduating, whether that's kids, relationship, you can always hone back on, okay, maybe I'm a little deviated right now, but like, what is my plan? Where am I at in that plan? And how can I move forward? Is what I would say is really important.
No, and that's good because that started even at high school level. You have resources right there available. So I like that. That's a great point. So please do pick up on that point. But we're going to go to a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Because Scott & Associates always treats me like family, I refer my family to them. So when preparing for my taxes and I know exactly what to bring in coming in, it makes the process so much easier. Anyone should hire Scott & Associates because they are professional, respectful, and very knowledgeable. And with all of my heart, I can always count on them.
All right, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit because we know Juneteenth is coming up. And it's coming up on Thursday. We normally have a special program when it comes to Juneteenth that we'll normally air. But this year, we're making this a part of our program today that we get to talk about Juneteenth a little bit. And we have become very conscious and aware of this being something that we have observed probably for, if I had to kind of look back, maybe for the last, so when we first, about 2016, and this, I'm just speaking for myself, but I know when we first started to kind of air Juneteenth, I think it was around about 2016 when we started to talk about it.
Somewhat 10 years or less.
Yeah. So just if you haven't heard of Juneteenth, I'm gonna share this here and I'm gonna open up the floor for my brothers to kind of share. But the Emancipation Proclamation was signed into law in January the 1st of 1863 by then President Lincoln. At that time, Black supposed to be free, right? Great. Like wrong, because everybody didn't get the memo. And the memo was given out a little later on, I think about 2 years later. And it was given out in Texas, I believe. And I think, Minister, if you want to go from there, I think it was a union leader that came and shared that information.
Just to, like you're saying, to go back, the importance of Juneteenth for us, it's like we have, for example, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but if you put your toes in the street, they're going to get stepped on.
Or ran over. Because
July 4th is coming up.
Yes.
And you can be patriotic about the country, but, the truth is the light.
Yes, sir.
Whereas July 4th, that's for my shirt, 1776.
Look at that.
We were not free. Us as a people, we were not free July 4th. In fact, when the Emancipation Proclamation happened, and even though we were supposed to be free, particularly down in Texas, it was almost 2 years to where slaves were, Black men and women were still being subject to slavery. And it was so bad that the Union had to send the military there 2 years later to liberate them and make them aware that slavery had ended. That's 2 years.
2 years.
And see, that's like how Shimuel was talking about it, Shimmy, compounding interest. We're not even going to talk about 400 years. Just 2 years. Imagine this, just a base salary for 2 years with interest, how much money that is. That will be owed to the people who were in slavery.
Right.
People say, oh, I didn't live then. Maybe you didn't. I didn't. But our ancestors did.
Right.
And somebody's ancestors got the benefit of that interest for those years. And it is transitioned through the years into where we are now. So it's like, if you're going to celebrate July 4th and you get out there and you're barbecuing and you're doing your cooking, I would invite you, do some research on Juneteenth, because we should be, if we're going to celebrate a day, that's the day that we should be recognizing and being conscious of. It took military might for that to happen.
Right. Let's bring everybody on the screen. Bring Yikiziki on the screen.
So yes, the Juneteenth should be a celebration for the people that were not a part of the July 4th celebration. So it's incumbent upon, especially the ex-slaves, to become conscious of what this means to them. Because if a decree can be passed and it takes 2 years for it to be implemented, then that's a lot of time, energy, and lives that were lost that could have been saved during that 2-year period. So in the gist of what we're speaking about, it's like you working for 2 years and never getting paid. How do your bills pile up in those 2 years? How do all your expenses pile up in those 2 years? Your car just sitting there for 2 years because you ain't been able to put no gas in it. So with the Juneteenth, we definitely need to become aware of how not to allow that 2-year gap to be applied in our life and our finances and our education and our social settings and our spiritual settings. Make sure that we are daily, as Shemuel said, have written goals and on a day-to-day basis making steps toward making those goals a reality so that our life can be whatever it is that we envision for ourselves.
Yes, sir.
We got some information.
You got a comment? Want to share that comment?
Yes, we got it posted, and it says Juneteenth is the oldest nationally recognized celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. When the last African American slaves learned that they were free 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Florida's own Emancipation Day is on May 20th, 1865, 11 days after the end of the Civil War, and 2 years after the proclamation first issued by Lincoln. And I would push this forward, like with Juneteenth, to be learning, like it should be a learning day. Something that we said here, like I'm gonna go back to something I said in the word of the day, which is about education is indoctrination if you're white, but it's subjugation if you're black. That we just were talking here today about interest. We were talking about saving, and we talk about investing. If we truly want to be free, like a lot of people, what does it say in the scriptures? You should know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. My question is, free from what? Slavery? Because one of my favorite topics is there's a modern day slavery, and it's called debt. If you're in debt, you are not free. But don't feel alone. There's a way to break those bands, and that's called get out of that debt. Part of that Juneteenth education, because if they're not going to teach it to you in the public school, it need to be taught at home, and we need to put it in our communities. It need to be on these podcasts, is living within your means, about working and understanding the importance of saving. Like, if you, a minimum of 10% of what you earn, you should put it away for your posterity. I like to talk slow. Posterity means don't touch it. Posterity means it's supposed to be there for your children and your children's children, because that's the way other folk are taught.
That's right.
They live it, and they do more than 10%. But the other part of that is whatever you're making, then you have to, if you're living, as Shimwell so eloquently said, you should live below your means, because part of that means whatever you're earning, you should be saving and you should be investing. That is how you become free. But when you're taught, and when we continue to spend everything that we make, and then when we get the credit cards and we spend more than we make, you are now a slave, because you are bound to that debt and you'll never be free. But the truth is what makes you free. If you know the truth, if when you know better,
you do better.
You do better.
Yes, sir. Indeed. I like this, sir. You know, we're talking about Juneteenth, but it's centered around education. You know, anytime we're so busy, like what you mentioned before, 4th of July, what we're doing, barbecuing. We still caught up in this system. We're still a zombie in this system. If you're not educating yourself, if your holiday, if whatever you're celebrating is not educating you some type of way, then why are you doing it? And I know oftentimes we say we're doing, well, we're having fun, we're with the family, etc. But know why you're doing what you're doing, you know. And we're talking about Juneteenth. You know, one of the things here I'm just thinking about, and I know it was at those times where we didn't have television, we didn't have, you know, mail was not just slow mail, it was slower than snail mail. So if there was any memos going that way, it probably wouldn't have got there. The horse, you know, the Union soldiers got there a lot faster. And then I don't think a lot of them wanted us to know anyway. So they knew about it. So, but as long as we didn't know, hey, you know, keep doing what you're doing. So the whole, you know, when I look at it from that standpoint, it's like, just know what's happening in the world, know what the system is doing. And our brother came in, he so eloquently shared with us, you know, what is happening in the system, you know, as a student, as a parent, you know, you should now know how to navigate some things. If you're listening to this podcast, you should, you know, pick up on some of this information. And we're gonna end this show with this brother sharing, you know, how, you know, if you got social media, how people can reach out to him. We're gonna end this show talking about this. But what we at? 225. I'm gonna give Yike Zeke. I know you didn't come in. I'm gonna give you your last word, and we're gonna go around the table.
Yes, sir. For all y'all that's graduating, I hope that this information was informative to you about learning how to have goals, about learning how to budget, about learning to investigate the reality of what you're going to be facing once you graduate, and study the myths so that you can prepare your mind to be able to flourish in this workforce once you get in it. Also, to become conscious of the Juneteenth, and don't let that 2-year gap become any part of your daily life. Use that as motivation to make sure that your words translate into actions, and that you don't become lethargic in the pursuit of your goals.
All right, Minister.
Yes, yeah, with education, I would definitely say education is, especially higher education, is a great thing. The key is don't let it become miseducation. If you're going to get the education, be focused and get an education that's going to be advantageous. Don't just get a piece of paper, get an education.
Indeed.
And Juneteenth, like I say, with July 4th, if I'm stepping on toes, you got to take them out of the street. You should be, if you're not conscious of Juneteenth, even if you are, I challenge you, if you're going to be barbecuing on July 4th, you go spend at least $100. I challenge you, take $100 and invest it. If you go spend that 100, I challenge you, invest another 100, because we live in a digital era now. You can invest $100 on major stocks. They done cut this. It's been broken down where you can do so. And then by next July 4th, look at what that $100 will do for you. But if you only go out and buy hot dogs and ribs and chicken and beer and eat it, next July 4th, you go be in the same thing. But if you putting something away, you keeping Juneteenth. If you are not investing or putting anything back, you need to readjust your thinking, and you need to consider Juneteenth.
All right, I like that. All right, sir. The last words I want you to be able to share with the audience, any thing of advice, and then how people can probably, follow you.
Yeah. So I guess first of all, I just want to say again, thank you all for having me today. Definitely, one of my favorite things to do is just talk with people about different things, whether that's finances, different social issues that people are having, and just, I guess, really the whole topic of this conversation is education, being knowledgeable. So I think my main piece of advice is actually something that you told, I don't know if you remember, you told me a long time ago. You had told me that you never want to just be average. And so I can always, particularly you were referring to like education, like while I'm making sure I take my grades up. And I would say, try to approach that in a lot of ways. When it comes to just knowledge, don't be the average person. What does the average person know? Try to go above it. What is the average person saving? Try to go above that. So that is a general piece of advice. I'm trying, don't be average. Don't be average. And then obviously maybe if you're, have the moral fortitude, maybe push other people not to be average as well, is what I would say.
And I think it was financial guru Ramsey. He said, live today like no one else so that you can live tomorrow
Bingo.
like no one else.
Yep.
And that's so powerful. It's so powerful. All right, family, we're going to get ready to close up. Before we go, we got some announcements. Mark your calendar for the second annual Trade Expo. Let's make sure that we put that on the screen. I see we got the wrong topic for today, but that's fine. So the second annual vocational trade show. So make sure you put that in your calendar, October the 25th of this year. Again, it's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we just want to come back out again and make this one bigger than the other one was. So registration will be coming soon. So stay tuned into Live Talk and you'll get that information. And another announcement is Live Talk will be airing on the first and the third Saturday of each month, starting July the 5th, I believe. That's July the 5th. Yeah, so tune in to our show July the 5th. That's going to be a Saturday at 1 p.m. And I just want to share my own little quote here. And I actually got two quotes, but I'm going to share one of them. Understanding yourself and the powerful history that defines your greatness is very important. And I think, understanding who you are in connection to how we go throughout life and what we have been through as a people here in this country is very important. Okay. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to say from the host, Peace and Prosperity, and from Live Talk, we are out. Thank you for watching Live Talk. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Live Talk Orlando. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit on the notification button so that you can see more videos like this. You want to join the show? Email us at livetalkorl@gmail.com. You can also follow the host on Facebook and Instagram at Arthur Jeremiah. And visit the website, thenoystore.com, to pick up your copy of The Spiritual Significance of a Name.